the recording this time, though.
Oh, there we
missed
go.
out twice.
Hello. No.
Well done.
I need some headphones.
Anything to cover that head up, mate, would be a good idea.
DT phone home.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, mate, we can hear that. Yeah.
Oh, you can. So Jeff hasn't muted me.
No.
No, you've got to be
still got that
careful
up.
what you say, Erica. Otherwise, you'll just silently mute you, and you'll be there talking for. But you just sit there.
I'm like the Donald Trump of Glenning Valley.
Oh, right. Exactly.
Well, I think with Jeff's technical expertise, I mean, we're happy he's found the record button this time. So, I mean, I was watching your other talks. It's just like, hang on, isn't this halfway through? Where's the missing bit? But obviously, he owned up to not doing the technical side.
Oh, it's hopeless. I sell this stuff too. You know, it's just so much concentrating on the moderator, and then I went, oh no, and which would have been excusable had it been the first time, but it wasn't. It was my second week in.
As much as you want me to watch it.
I feel like they should put the marketing spin on this. In reality, what we saw was the free version of the talks, and if you pay $199.95, we'll release the full version. All right.
Well, I mean, I think we're trying the whole gamut of every meeting software out there. So, you know, another location. But obviously, you can't do cool backgrounds on this place. So we'll just, you know, I've even tidied my office. So I hope you enjoy.
Beautiful, beautiful. Oh, we might kick things off, guys. Is everyone good to
Cool.
go?
Do you like my background? There you go, Erica. You should have put some paragliding in the background. Jeez.
Oh, I
like
should
the
have.
Eagles,
Oh,
Phil.
how can I compete with
Hey?
that?
I like the Eagles.
That's classic. How can I compete
Oh
with
yeah,
that?
there you go. How's that for an eagle?
Yeah.
When I want to fly but can't. When I want to fly but can't, that's what I do. I just sit and look at it.
Lovely, mate. Lovely.
Sorry,
All right.
sorry to interrupt.
That's all right. Okay. So thanks everyone for attending tonight. Thank you for attending. Yeah, so we welcome to Erica Caro, our beautiful pilot extraordinaire from New Zealand. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here, Erica. Thank you so much. I have can I just say politely, I think someone's eating dinner and at the microphone, I could just hear a knife and fork across the plate.
Mandy, shut up.
So if you want to mute your microphone, guys, you can wave your mouse across the bottom of the screen and you'll see your audio controls. You can mute your microphone. Please feel free to unmute. Hey, Mandy, if you want to, if you wish to speak, please feel free. Yeah, so again, welcome Erica. And yeah, in asking Erica for a bio of her flying career, she replied to me, it's about 25 years less than Stefan Stiegler and about 1,000 hours less than our world champion pilot Stefan. In all seriousness, we thought it'd be a great idea to have Erica speak as a guest for a couple of reasons, and Erica knows I mean this in the nicest possible way. You know, not all of us are seasoned comp pilots, and yet Erica's been flying since 2015, has had quite a lot of experience flying comps. You've now flown, what, 13 competitions?
13, yeah.
13, fantastic. And I have told Erica that about a year ago, I think it was, in my YouTube feed, some stuff on paragliding came up, but I was watching the Gin Wide Open, and who should I see in that but Erica and another mutual friend of ours, Frosty, Stephen Frost from Australia. And Steve and Erica went over and competed in the Gin Wide Open, and that definitely got my interest as well. So just reading your bio here, Erica, you've been flying since 2015, and you're PG2 licensed in New Zealand, and we were trying to work this out. We think that may be equivalent to about a PG4, maybe even a PG5 here in Australia. We're not 100% sure. And you've got your IP4, and we noticed too.
That's right.
Yeah, beautiful. And so Lisa Bradley taught you to fly, did she?
She did. So if anyone can get anyone off the ground, it's Lisa Bradley. I'll give a shout out to Lisa.
Lisa's brilliant. So I learned with Godfrey, but as you know, Godfrey runs big classes and he has lots of people helping. And I feel one of the people who was instrumental in helping me as a novice pilot was Lisa. I used to have a habit of coming into land at Manila and then just falling in a heap on the ground. And it was Lisa that figured out that I was looking at my feet as I came into land and flare. She said, Scotty, try looking forward as you come into land. Let's see how that works. And so Lisa fixed that for me, which was great. So yeah, today Erica mentions here she's flown for about 200 hours, which again is great. I mean, some people get fixated on hours, but of course, if you're a coastal pilot, 200 hours is nothing compared to flying in inland and in competition. That's quite a feat as well. So yeah, without any further ado, I think we'll hand it over to Erica, and she's going to regale us with her stories. Thank you, Erica.
Hey guys, thanks for having me tonight, and great introduction from Scotty, which is great. So I had a look at the other talks that you guys have had. Really interesting. The bits that I saw, Jeff. So you guys have had some really pros do the talking. So I'm just going to do a full, fair disclosure and open, of where I'm at. So if you've sort of got, as Scott was saying, so you've had Gavin, you've got Martin Harville, you've got Stiegler, and I'm here. So if we take off 20 years, 5,000 hours, they're still better pilots than me. So just keep in perspective what I'm going to talk about, because it is just my perspective. And again, when we were talking about the issue of the rating differences between Australia and New Zealand, I'm PG2. So in New Zealand, PG2 is fully licensed. That's it. You're on your own. You can fly anywhere. Just go for it. But of course, we all know as beginners, once you get your PG2, you're really only at the stage of now knowing you don't know enough and your learning has to continue. So my hours, 200 compared to some Australian pilots, quite small. But I also have to think the route that I've taken to get to those 200 hours, I've actually put quite a bit of quality into it. So sort of talking about my style of flying and my style of learning really, sort of pushed me towards heading into competition. So when Scott approached me, I thought, you've got so many fantastic Australian top pilots like Kari Ellis, Kirsten Sito, Gareth, like top guys. I'm like, well, why on earth did he want to talk to me? And then he did a very nice comment saying that, a perspective from a non-seasoned pilot at a competition. Yeah, I'm not a pro pilot. Unlike everybody, I'm not a pro. It's amateur hour, but with a bit of class and distinction thrown in. So where I'll sort of start you from is my learning down in the South Island with Lisa Bradley. I was going to a geography lesson as well. New Zealand, 2 islands, north and south. I live in the North Island. We do have a local flying site, and we used to have a local instructor. I approached him to learn, didn't quite work out, and then just by coincidence, I bumped into someone from the south, and it says, you can go to Queenstown and you can learn in a week, 10 days, 2 weeks. Whereas my home site, the instructor was a weekend pilot, and it could take 2 years. Thank God I went down to Queenstown. And that's when I met Lisa, and, 2 weeks later, I was fully PG2'd and sent off my merry way back to my home site. So coming back, you're all gung-ho as a beginner pilot. You think you're going to fly every 5 minutes, and it never seems to work out that way. My situation, I'm self-employed. So I had these great ideas that I'd, have my pack in the back of my car. I'd get a break in the day. I'd go for a quick fly. Never happens. Never happens. My local site is one of the more committing and daunting launches in New Zealand. So again, coming back as a new pilot, you do need a bit of hand-holding. But in New Zealand, we don't have the system that we have in Australia, like the club, the safety officer, where you've got to go to your club and, get more hand-holding. We don't do that in New Zealand. So I started to realise that at my own daunting site, because I'm a fully licensed pilot, I'd turn up at a club which hadn't had any brand new novice members for a number of years, and the normal pilots would go, okay, it's up to you if you want to fly. So I very quickly realised that my skill set was short, and the club at that stage was not they were welcoming, but they weren't speaking to a new beginner pilot on on my level. And I just come from, 2 weeks of committed flying to learning. And then I realised I'm not going to get a lot of flying because I'm new, it's a daunting sight, I'm unsure, all of those new pilot activities, coupled with the fact that I'm self-employed and I just don't get the opportunity to fly. So I sort of came back and tried to go, potted around, did a lot of wing holding, very little flying. And it was quite shocking to realise that, am I ever going to fly? And those doubts sort of come in, but you're still all enthusiastic. And I followed Lisa to Oz to follow up with some more training at her Australia base. And it was there that I met Stephen Frost, Frosty, and Daniel Fleming. So it was good to get a bit of extra training. And just out of the blue, I got a call maybe 4 or 5 months after I'd completed my PG2 from these guys and says, hey, we're going to Bali. You're coming. And that's where I met Jeff and Scott at the cloud-based Bali trip. And it was a great learning opportunity. And I had no idea that places, there were companies that did tours, that you could actually go somewhere and learn. And Mark and Chris ran a great tour. My flying was not the best. And I think Scott landed in a tree, but I didn't. So let's just establish a few facts.
I
have got photos.
Yeah.
So I came back to New Zealand, and what struck me was I did best because I got flying. I committed to going somewhere for a week, 10 days, and that's it. I was committing somewhere to fly. Whereas at my home site, I would never take a week off to go fly because I'm always working, the phone's going. So it got me thinking that maybe touring is where I'm going to get most of my flying, which the reality was it turned out, because I don't know how many of you guys are self-employed, that you say you're going to go flying and you never, well, I never do. So I started looking at tours, and purely, again, by chance, I'd come across to Australia, did Manila, did the XC camp, and it just reinforced the commitment of picking a solid time window to go fly, and gained more experience, and it consolidated the daily learning process. So it wasn't just going out for an hour after work or the weekend and then not really going for 3 or 4 days and having to start again. And as a learner and a beginner pilot, I realised that my learning style was better in a consolidated. And it's nice just to go away for a week and have a flying holiday. So again, long story short, I got a call out of the blue from some friends who said, hey, we've booked a tour in Italy. You're coming, which you do. And so that was all teed up to go to Bassano. Now, being on our side of the world, if you've got to get over to the other side, you're like, what am I going to do? I'm not just going to go for the week or the 2 weeks. You make a commitment. So I should jump in. Prior to this, I had done the New Zealand Open backtrack. After I came back from Bali, just by chance, I was looking at our association website and the New Zealand Open was running. And I didn't see competition. I didn't see I'm going there to win and everything. I thought, here is a location in New Zealand, 2 hours drive for me, that's going to have a week's flying. So that's all I looked at it. And I thankfully got an entry, possibly because they were running short of women. I don't mind that. I got a slot to take up. And I had a week's flying in New Zealand in competition conditions, but very gentle competitions. I didn't have to worry about travel. It was local for me. I knew a lot of people, and it was the most rewarding experience as a beginner. I didn't do well. I had some great landings and landed in cowpats, but I had some nice takeoffs, but a solid week of flying with a big group of people who were all there for the same reason. So you don't often get, we're all busy, but no one really says, okay, we'll all be together with the intention of flying. and it just worked really well. So that was quite a nice, it was just like a holiday for me. I wasn't really aware of the competition. It didn't strike me as big and scary. I'll talk about how I approached competitions in the early days, which might come at it in a different way than what you're expecting. But for me, that first competition, the New Zealand Open, was just about going somewhere for 7 days and flying. So that went well. So I'd sort of had a very good introduction, but not really knowing any of the mechanics of competitions. Then we had this option to go to Italy for a tour, signed up for that. And I thought, well, I'm going overseas, what else can I do? Because you're spending all that money, that's the expensive part to get there. Let's see what else we can do. And just by chance, Google searching, I came across Air Tribune, which is a website where international competitions get listed. I was just scrolling through and just happened to randomly click on a competition called the Navita, which was listing in around the time I was going to be. Didn't know anything about it, but I scrolled down and I saw another New Zealander was listed as attending. And I knew this person. So I got on the Facebook, says, oh, what's happening? And found a small group of Kiwis, about 5 of us, who were actually going to Europe to do competitions. And they said, come along. So absolutely by luck, I managed to find 3 competitions that were running at the same place, back to back, and fit in perfectly ahead of my Italian tour. So that's how it all actually got started. So I enrolled for a big competition, which was the Kruševo Open. And then I also went in for 2 other fun competitions called the Gin Wide Open and the Navita. So you rock up overseas and you get started.
Sorry, mate. Can I just jump in for a quick second? So you said that you completed your training in Australia. So you came and you said you did the Manila summer camp, was it?
The XC camp, the XC camp. Yeah.
So would that have been your introduction to thermaling and, for the most part, inland flying?
For learning in New Zealand, most of we learn inland. We have, we do have a few mountains compared to Australia. So there's definitely a difference between a New Zealand thermal and an Australian thermal. Absolutely 2 different beasts. So learning with Lisa in New Zealand, I learnt with her under the New Zealand rating system. Mm-hmm. But because I realised I didn't feel I had enough coaching or extending learning, she said, come over to the Australian school. So though I didn't cross over into the Australian system, I basically joined another learner group of hers that were running in Australia for just some extra top up, just some consolidation on my learning. So I was, had experience of both. And then from meeting other people, then I heard about Manila and, why not have a go? But yes, most of my flying inland, coastal flying terrifies me. I'm no good at it. I mean, I struggle with piloting.
I didn't mean to cut you off in your story, but I thought it'd be nice to get some perspective of the level of experience you'd had prior to like your first competition, your NZ Open. So you'd done some flying at Manila. So now, and again, I apologise for sort of derailing your story, but so we'll jump back into Italy. So now you've signed up for 3 competitions.
So basically all of this took place within a 12-month period of doing my first New Zealand Open and meeting people and saying, okay, we're going to go flying. So in between going to competitions, my first one, I probably may have only put on 20 hours. I started doing competitions probably at about the 40, 45 hour mark, if that's an indication of how much flying I was getting. And you talk about like my average time in the air would have been about, a really good flight for me might have been 45 minutes. I might have been sitting on the hill for an hour trying to assess the situation and work out what the weather's doing, and I'm here but no one else is here. What's wrong? Have I got the day wrong? Okay, everybody's already launched and left and you're left there by yourself. But all those sorts of things that while you're around the paragliding, you might not be in the air experiencing. And it just reinforced to me in my situation, there were elements that were barriers to me sort of moving forward that I had to address. And again, I suddenly realised out of just how much I enjoyed committing to going away for a week's holiday just to fly, whether that be with a tour or subsequently going on competitions. So headed off completely in the blue to Macedonia. Quite a way to get to from our side of the world. It's well worth getting. It's expensive to get there, but it's very cheap when you're in there. So I arrive and start the next 3 weeks of fantastic flying. Again, you do learn on the go, but a lot of what is to try and express how a competition runs is the mechanics. But to arrive, you get a pack. All the details are on Air Tribune, and you find websites and you start gearing up and all the things you've got to do. But the main point was to make the decision to go and fly for a week. That's all I went there with the intention of doing. The competition was a secondary element. All I saw was 7 days of flying and starting. So I'll give you if you want, if we can we'll do a screen share, because I'll throw up to some of the tabs, which will make a bit of sense to give you an idea of how Air Tribune works and how we fly up. So we'll see how this goes. We'll do share. How's that going, guys? Can you see that?
It's probably just loading up. It might be, there we go. Yep.
Okay. So this is the Air Tribune website. This is under their next event section. So this is where, when I decided to start looking into competitions, well, looking at competitions as something to do while I waited to go on my tour. And I just flicked through and found something that I liked. And so, for instance, if you want to open something, so you just basically go slow and it clicks open, and it'll open the details of the competitions. It'll give the dates, where it is, what's happening, and you read about a competition. So I came across the Macedonia competitions. This is in 2018, 17, and I just signed up. I had no idea. I didn't read the requirements. I didn't read the minimums, and luckily enough, I got in. So when you sort of register, you'll see lists of pilots. And this is where I was looking, and I was trying to find, and this is the sort of thing where I saw some Kiwi names. And then I got in touch with them and we found it all. So it's, that's the main driver that sort of put me onto those competitions. What I didn't realise at the time was the 3 competitions I signed up for were completely different in style. And had I had got a serious talk on what competitions I'd signed up for, I possibly would have not gone flying on those 3 weeks. But ignorance is bliss, and it worked out really well. The first of the competitions was the Krushevo Open, which was a high-end, big competition. 120 pilots. We're talking triple Cs, 2-liners, Ds, top pilots. This was a year that all of the main European season was running. So there was the British Open, the Nordic Open. The big guns were turning up. I had no idea what a big competition was or what it worked out at. 2 other competitions I found out were the fun competitions, which were designed for people who hadn't competed before. So I signed up. I didn't get any sideways looks when I turned up to registration day on my first Krushevo Open. You present paperwork, your qualifications, and because it's an open, it means just that. There is the limitations on the type of entry you can have is open. So normally, say like the bigger competitions, you may have to have more ranking points or fly a certain glider to be entry. But this open, I could turn up there with my low B Skywalker Reba and join in with guys who were doing Enzos and Bonanzas. No different. And then you suddenly realise your day starts, and thankfully there are some Kiwis there, so I had people to sit with, and you get started. But I'm just going to pause a bit, because part of why I looked to do competitions, again, it was kind of like I'm going for somewhere to a week to fly. That's the main reason. What I didn't realise is that competition-wise, dollar bang for your buck, competitions are actually cheaper than touring. So I'll just go to explain what you get when you sign up for a competition in Europe, especially in Eastern Europe. So with your registration, you will get a ride to launch, you will get lunch, you will get water, you will get retrieves, you will get tracking, and all those sorts of things that you don't realise. If you're flying alone in a country, you have to organise those things all yourself. Or if you're with your tour, you're paying for that service. So all of a sudden I realised, hey, I'm getting all this support in with my registration fee and a t-shirt. T-shirts on competition, that's really all it's about at my level. Top. Bragging rights with t-shirts is the way to go. So the first day, you go to the loading area, you get a bus up to launch, people carry your bags in, you sit around, and the day starts. It's a long day. But sitting there that first week, I suddenly realised what a competition made my flying better. The barriers that I had as a beginner pilot, the things that concerned me, I'm not good at weather, especially as a beginner pilot. Weather, looking ahead, judging conditions over the day, not just when you're launching, but looking at the weather as a whole. Site briefings, understanding the lay of the land, which way the sun comes up. I'm terrible at direction. I have concerns about what happens if anything goes wrong. You know, at my home site, everybody in the club could be flying, but I'm on the ground by myself and everybody's off on XC. And what happens if I have a stumble? Who's going to be there? All those sorts of issues that sort of lay in the back of your mind and sit on your shoulders that you have to work through, and then you fly. And what I was realising was that all of those decisions, it would take me a long time to get through it, and that would leave my energy and reserves for flying greatly reduced. So I look at it that you've got a jar of energy or resources for your flying day. And if a lot of my effort is taken up in making decisions to get off the ground, even turning up to fly, you know, do I leave my car at the bottom? Who's going to be there? That sort of took over my thinking process, and it left not very much for actual flying, for being active in flying and enjoying it, and then also having enough left in the jar to land perfectly and not arse off on your face, as always happens. And so sitting in a competition, I realised that all of those concerns I had were answered as part of the daily briefing. The task committee and the organisers will give you a full weather briefing, so you'll get the day covered, and they will only set a task or a race if the weather's good, if the task can happen. So immediately I'm thinking, weather's good. They wouldn't be setting a task if it wasn't going to be on. Great, don't have to worry about that. Safety. With especially the FAI Category 2 style competitions, which are where you get your points, there has to be a certain amount of on-site security and safety. So there's lots of launch marshals around, you're being tracked. Most of the time it's live tracking. They have paramedics on the launch, all those types of things. That's like, great, someone's looking out for me. Secondly, I get a retrieve. So even if you bomb out at the bottom or you make it to goal or anywhere in between, there is a retrieve service. It's all part of what you pay for. So those sort of elements that used to sit on my shoulder and then I'd have to go through all my routine, which you should normally, which you do, a lot of that was taken off my hands. I had someone giving me full briefings, and I could judge if it was right for me to fly that day in that task. So I thought, wow, someone else is taking care of these decisions that actually weigh heavily on me. That was one of the most freeing things that helped build my confidence in flying. So now you're thinking, great, here I am sitting with 120 pilots. They're all gearing up. And then you suddenly look around and everybody's flying Enzos and Xenos. And you start to understand this is a race. But from talking with a couple of Kiwis who were there and other members, some really nice Danish guys gave me some really good tips. People are there to race, no doubt about it. They're the top 80 pilots. They will go hard, they will go fast. You've got 2 or 3 hours to launch and to be in the sky. You can be on the course line and not be anywhere near them. So they launch early, they get going, and they are racing. You come after them, the pressure is off, and you're on a guided XC competition or an XC route where you know where to go, and you've got people ahead of you who are spotting the thermals. So I started going from my longest free flight XC at my home site, might have been 10K, 8K, to being able to log 60K without even thinking about it, because the elements that were barriers to my flying had been not taken off my shoulders, because you still have to make a choice to fly that day if the conditions are what you like. But it just immediately made me settle. There was a safety being with other people, to manage myself better. And I was not daunted by being with 120 pilots in the air, because you're never in the air together. You're spread out, and it was very good to go to that first competition. And I was fortunate enough that to be in the air with some of the top pilots was quite an experience. You still have to gaggle fly, etc., but it's not dramatic. It looks dramatic from the ground when you're looking up, because you're seeing 100 and something pilots above you. But when you're in the air, when like myself, I launched later, the race has started, everybody's gone. It's me and about 10 other people tootling along behind to do the course. It just was fantastic. It was really eye-opening. It was great.
A quick question on that. I think that's absolutely brilliant that like flying in a unfamiliar place, and you've just entered a competition where you've got retrieve drivers, you've got briefings, you've got the weather. I love that. I'm taking that. I'll use that. But just really quickly, I know like we've obviously got all level of people in the talk tonight, from competition pilots through to fairly new pilots. For your first competition, were you handed an instrument that was a part of the comp, or did you have to learn how to feed in all your waypoints and like flying into a goal and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I can talk about the mechanics of a day. So I originally bought a second-hand Flymaster. You know, everybody gets an instrument when they feel they're ready. Part of competitions is you do have to have an instrument that can guide you around a task using GPS waypoints. You don't need an instrument. I had a second-hand one, but I utilised my iPhone. So an iPhone with Fly Sky High works perfectly well. Everybody has all the toys and the bells and whistles, but all you need is an iPhone, and it works perfectly. Again, I had to reach out to people, say the Kiwis who were there, who helped me out on the day, how to load up tasks and things like that. But again, once the task is issued, you'll sit around for 2 hours. And as we all know in paragliding, if you can't sit around and talk and occupy yourself and be social, you don't stick much at paragliding. So people are very helpful. So you'll sit next to someone and you say, oh, have I got this right? Does this task look the same? And they also put the task up on the board so you can consolidate and do everything. So it's the mechanics of a day I can go through, but it just sort of, as a beginner pilot, as a novice pilot, to really by accident just go to these competitions, and I suddenly realised it was a learning experience rather than a competition. It consolidated day by day, reinforcing my learning for every day. So I wasn't competing. I was not going to get a podium at this stage. If I could get to the first turn point, I was stoked. And the next day, enjoyable. I'd gone over all my tracks. I'd looked at what I've done. And part of competitions is often every evening they organise social events where you can get together with other pilots, or they'll do review briefings on how the task went. So it's learning at each stage. But the commitment of being there with other people who are there for the week to fly is very, for me, it worked well. Each day I increased, I got better. I could tell I was improving. And it's fantastic. So I was hooked after that first competition. Mm-hmm. So very interesting, flying with amazing gliders, seeing everything, fantastic. It was very exhausting. So then we had the second 2 weeks, which were these fun competitions, which just were brilliant. So what we can do is I'll do a screen save and we'll just go on to a couple of sites. Hopefully we can show you some pictures and maybe a bit of video, because there is a difference between a high-end competition and a fun competition. One is not better than the other. I'm quite comfortable to enter a high-end competition now, as I was then, but I was only happy to enter a high-end competition back then because I didn't know anything. That's the honest truth, but it worked out quite well. So I'll just fling over. We'll see if we can make this work. Bear with me, guys. Mm-hmm. Come on, load up. Can you see all of that?
Should be up in a second. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
So the first competition, that's actually got a really good website. So after the Kruševo Open, I went into the fun competition area. So the Gin Wide Open is run by a guy called Toby Colombo of Passion Paragliding, and it is an association with obviously Gin Wings, and it is exactly what it says on the tin. The competition format is the same. You do briefings, support, pickups, deliveries, everything, but it's even more all-encompassing. They go out of their way to make you feel part of it. Again, you're with 100 pilots. It's quite daunting, again, when you sort of line up and you've still got that many people to deal with, but the competition format is aimed as a fun. So the aspect ratio on wings is reduced. So really, I think a C, so sports class, is the highest rated wing that is allowed to go in the competition. So it's mostly people on Bs, 1 or 2 Cs. The tasking arena is reduced and the tasks are easier. So whereas in a high-end open competition, like the first one I was in, task distances were 80, 90, 100K quite regularly. Whereas the Gin Wide Open, the tasking route may have been 30K, 40K in a reduced confined area. So it encourages you to move as a group to get the same enjoyment as competition, but it's more achievable. That doesn't mean you make gold. I never made gold, but the emphasis is to encourage more people to go through. So this is their website. Now, the Gin competition is probably, without doubt, one of the most oversubscribed competitions I've come across. It's very, very popular with the Brits. Internationally, it's oversubscribed. So they don't announce the competition through Air Tribune. So you have to keep checking on their website. So I thoroughly recommend, if you're interested in looking what they can do, have a look through here. So everything you need to know, they talk about tracking results, event details, and this is where you will find all the information that you need to actually take part in the competition. As you can see here, there's waypoints, which is you'll talk about where you get your waypoints. So a waypoint is a GPS location in a landscape. that they use to guide you around. And then the details on pilot entry, payment, pilot list, etc. So if we look at the pilot list, we'll see who we go. So this is, everybody watches this. So if you register, it's not first come, first served. It is, they do look at who has registered. So whereas other competitions, it could be a first come, first served basis. But lots of people look at the ratings of the wings. They're not high wings. So this is kind of my level of if you want to rate skill set to wings, these are the sort of wings I'd be happily flying. I feel this is relative to my skill level. And that's another reason why when you try and ascertain what's going to work, this is a good indicator. Again, I didn't realize this until I'd done 3 or 4 competitions and suddenly realized how it works and what goes on. I thought nothing of entering the first competition with Xenos and Enzos. Didn't even faze me. So in that respect, ignorance was bliss, and I managed it quite well because I wasn't competing. I was there primarily to have a week's flying and to learn and just get more hours in the year. So in that respect, it worked really well.
Great.
So we did 3 solid weeks of flying. It is tiring. You do get a day break. Macedonia was fabulous for flying. We were flying, every day was flyable. At times I chose not to fly. So I took, you have to treat yourself well. I'm there for a holiday. If it's not going well or I didn't fly that day, just backed off. So 3 weeks in Macedonia, fantastic. Then I left and went to my expensive tour in Italy. Absolutely hated it, had a terrible experience. And that in itself reconfirmed to me that competitions were actually delivering more for me than a tour. That's not to say I haven't done tours since, but on reflection, the cost involved and what you get for your money, for me, a competition delivered more than touring. It was exactly the same. I felt I got more coaching, more development, and just consolidating all those skills that you get in the week. Your learning is fast paced. So to put on every day, I'd do 3 or 4 hours on the hill. I might be flying for 2.5. I was, without even thinking about it, going past all my personal bests of how far I was flying, how high I was flying, and how much time I was spending in the air without realizing it, because it's a different mindset. If I'm Xing myself, I have to admit, I'll get bored after half an hour. It's like, well, where do I go? What do I do? Here, those decisions, you know where you're going to go. So you don't have to think about that. You have to think how to get there, how to work the puzzle. And so those first 3 competitions. Yeah.
Sorry, mate. So you just mentioned, so you've gone over to Italy, so presumably you're talking about Pisano. So did you go by yourself over there, and that was a case of just showing up in a foreign country, trying to get the lay of the land, or were you on some sort of tour there?
This was the main reason why I went to Europe that year. So Daniel and Susie, we had decided to go touring with a well-known coach, shall we say, a particular guy who runs a tour, quite a celebrity. So we paid, and that was turning up, doing a tour, and I did not enjoy myself. I had quite an interesting time, and it actually set my flying back. My experience in Italy set my flying back, probably knocked all my confidence out of my wind. So again, I wouldn't turn up, still being a new pilot, I would never just turn up to a foreign country and try and work it out. That's not my skill set. But turning up to a foreign country with a competition, absolutely I'd go, because you're getting all of those requirements met as through part of the competition. You get your site briefings, you get your weather, you get your the airspace, all those things that you otherwise have to work out on your own. as part of a competition setup. So Europe competition, those 8 weeks I spent in Europe that year, amazing experience. And you are pushing yourself out there. You are, albeit with a group of people, you turn up as a solo pilot, but you're together. It worked very well for me, and it was good. But the downside was my tour didn't go well, and I had a crisis of confidence after coming back from Italy, which took a number of months, well, almost a year to get over. Wow. And I'd have to say again, it was my involvement in the competition scene that actually built up my confidence again. So from that perspective, it really
just a quick one. I think
Thank you. Erica, it sounds really brave of you to turn up to those competitions, and you've been really honest about where your doubts were. Can you describe some of the scariest parts of those competitions? Probably that first one too.
Again, I'm being honest here. If I was to say I wasn't scared, on one hand, that was actually true. There is comfort in a group of people doing things. And again, this probably my lack of being scared was probably because of lack of knowledge, because I really didn't understand what a competition was. I was green. So I came into it as, again, looking at it like, I'm going to be here for 7 days. I'll let the top guns go first. I know, again, going through competitions, that the launch window might be 2 hours. I'm allowed to slot any time in 2 hours. The race starts here. I'll launch after the race has started. So I really wasn't aware of the complications and the risks that are involved in competition flying, purely because of lack of knowledge. I've understood more as I've gone on, but in my perspective, how I utilise the competition to not race, just to be part of an extended XC experience, worked well for me. And until I'd seen some of the problems in later years at competitions, when people make questionable decisions and that idea of being a competition takes over, then I understand more of the risk. But to be honest, at the very first competition, at the high-end comp, I knew so little that probably the risks didn't scare me as much as what they ought to have done. If that's a way of explaining it.
Yeah, it sounds like the secret to your formula there was not feeling pressured to take off with the rest of them and just wait till they'd all gone. I'd say that's the most stressful part of a competition for any newbie and for those who have been doing them for quite some time. So that sounds like a really good tip.
Well, this is actually a good time to talk about, from my perspective, is the mechanics of the day in a competition. Just go through how it works. So in Europe, you get a ride up to launch. You sit around, you might be up there for 9 o'clock, 9:30 in the morning, maybe 10. And at Macedonia, there was always coffee and some people handing out food, and there's a nice seated area. And people start gathering, you get your wings out. It's all very relaxed and easy going. And then there's a feeling as the task committee start forming and they're looking at the weather and people are looking at their phones and standing out viewing. And myself as a beginner pilot, I'm just milling around chatting with the other Kiwis or some other Brits I might have got to know. And the day starts to develop. So the task is set, or they have a weather briefing and they say, okay, we're going to have our first briefing at 11 o'clock. So 11 o'clock, you just middle around, and 11 o'clock comes around, you go into the area. In Macedonia, it's a nice sort of seated area. And you'll start, the launch director will start doing the briefings for the day. So this is, for me, I got my understanding of how the day is going to play out, that they start talking about the weather. And it's not just we've got a northerly or a southerly. You get the talk on cloud base. You get, what the heights are expected, the quality of the thermals that are expected, all those technical details that I wasn't aware of as a beginner, but you're in there with the group and you're getting an education as it's happening. So everybody starts to get a bit more serious, and then they'll say, okay, we'll reconvene, we'll set the task, but we'll come back. So you might have to go away. The task committee goes off and talks amongst themselves. We get called back. So this might be another 45 minutes. So we're approaching the top of the day, like 11:30, 12 maybe. So you've had a long day, but it's quite relaxed. So at this time, I'm milling around. I might have gone for a bit of a wander up the back or sat down in the shade, talking to people. And this is when it starts to change. So the task goes up. So this is when they put the map on the board. We'll say task 1, blah, blah, blah. So you find the route that they've decided to go for the day. And part of my understanding of tasking, and this is another reason it gave me security, was the task committee would not task or set a task unless it was a good day to do it. So I know the weather's fine. I know where they're going to send us in the landscape. I know we're going to go left at launch and go to the next turn point. So where they're sending us is the weather's good. They're expecting it to be a certain part or a certain way because we're going that way. We know the wind's coming. We get timing briefings saying, well, if you're on the course at this time of the day, expect this weather. So I know where to go. And a task is set, a high-end task, a high-end competition. It's tasked, Kirsten, you can probably double-check me on this, that a certain amount of people, at least half of the field, half of the 120 pilots, should make it round most of the course, maybe halfway. And the further into the task you go, the more complicated it gets. So I had mapped out for me at that task briefing the plan for my flying for the day. Whether I made it round or not a problem. So you get your task, and an important part of when they issue the task, they will also issue the timings. And this is where, as a beginner, for me, how I manipulated, maybe that's not the right, how I changed the system to suit my flying. So as Kirsten was saying, pressure on launch is one of the things that you can't get away from. Even if you're launching at your own site, you always have that natural pressure. So when you're in these groups of people, there's a feeling that comes across the group. The action starts to happen. You can feel it. You can feel the group come alive. So when they announce what the start time of the task is, so for instance, the start time, so there's 2 times. There's launch open, and then there's the race start. So experts like Kirsten, this is when they're starting to get into the competition and the race mode, because I know that I have, say, the launch window, that's the time when you're allowed to start flying, is between, say, for instance, 1 o'clock, and the last time you can take off is 3 o'clock. So I've got 2 hours to make a choice to fly. The competition pilots will go first, and they will go 1 second past 1 o'clock. As soon as that launch window opens, they will go, and they will fight to get to the front of the line, to push people off. It just happens. Safely, of course. It's all marshalled and things, but the bigger gun pilots, there'll be a rush to get out because they know they are racing. They want to be in the air right before the start of the race. So the start of the race might not be, say, till 2:15. So you would have to be flying for an hour and 20 minutes, even before your race starts. So for me as a beginner pilot, when I'm going, I can't even fly for an hour and a half. What am I going to do? And talking to someone, says, you don't have to go early. You can go at the back of the queue. So for me, you can go down and actually be a spectator for the front competitors. So you've got 70 people who are queued up, waiting to go, literally, clawing at the bit to get first on the launch pad. You can stand around and be a spectator. So I know I've got 2 hours to get ready, to relax, and because I'm not competing. So then one of the things, the pressure for me, that's great. I like watching flying. That's me. But then you're on the ground and all of a sudden you look at all these gliders above you and you suddenly realise, when was the last time you saw 70 people in a gaggle? That was something to really behold as a beginner pilot. So if you've flown Manila at any of the XC camps, you're used to a busy site. It's great to see. It's a bit chaotic. Competitions are more controlled because you have turn direction. So in theory, everybody knows which way. We all turn the same way. Doesn't always happen, but that's the idea. But to all of a sudden be on launch, having a great time, and you look up and you just see this massive gaggle of spinning death, that is something that is quite hard. That struck me as, there's quite a few people here. So I often stopped being a spectator and walked away and had my lunch. So I relaxed. And again, coming up, so my strategy, talking with other pilots, and one of the best group of people I met there was this amazing group of Danes who, their holidays, and this is another reason why I've taken to competitions, they do the European season purely as a holiday adventure. And they have this attitude, which I absolutely love. They said, it's a holiday. I'm not going to race. I'm going on an XC. And they encouraged me to say, why go early? You don't have to launch till 3 o'clock. So I would queue up. There may be 15 people left on the ground. And I'd line up to go with about half an hour before the start gate. So I'm still trying not to look up, because everybody in Macedonia, there's a couple of very big, prominent areas to gain lift, just happen to be over launch or just off launch. So I wouldn't look up. But then all of a sudden, I'd be ready to set up, you're calming your nerves, you've got the launch marshal. They only launch when it's straight in, there's no crosswinds. If there's a crosswind, they close the launch, those types of things. And then I'm ready to go. I get my call up saying launching, and I'm in the air with 10 minutes to the start of the race. Everybody is 3,000 metres above me. It's going to take me half an hour to get up. I don't know. By the time I'm in the air, I'm not looking at 70 pilots. I'm looking at the 5 of us who are just out in front of me. And immediately your vision changes. You're no longer staring at a super gaggle. You're flying with 5, 10 other people. The race starts. I'm still climbing in my first turn. You get up there and you might be flying with 10 people. You have your own gaggle and you look ahead down the course line. You finally start to understand what your instrument means and you follow the arrow. And you've got all these people ahead of you who are working the thermals, who are pointing you which way to go. So the pressure of racing for me was not there, because all that competitiveness had gone by the time I was in the air. So that's where it actually, you just got to switch the way the competition works. And I learned that purely by meeting other people at competitions who used competitions for that reason alone, as in it's cheaper than a tour, they consolidate their learning, they get new sites, pickups, all that sort of thing. So being at the back of the pack and launching late for me was great. But as Kirsten said, there are pressures on launch, but it was how I chose to step away from them that eased just that, that sort of, not looking at it and coming in. So, and that added to my comfort each time I did it. But that was my strategy, to always launch late. There's no point. If I tried to fly for an hour and a half at this stage, that would be my race over. At least, half an hour before the race starts, by the time I'm in the air, the race has started. I'm there's no giant gaggles to deal with. I've got people ahead of me. It worked very, very well. So that's one of the main reasons which works great.
Excellent. So just a quick question, and you mentioned that the very first competition you went in was quite a serious competition, and the next two were kind of fun. Looking at the gym wide open here, it looks like that was about 340 euros. I think I read. I might have that wrong.
The gym is quite expensive relative to other competitions, but
so sorry, we have a bit of a lag. The first one you went in, how much was that?
I paid from memory about 270 euro.
Wow. Okay.
So it is significantly cheaper than touring. Significantly.
Yeah.
Okay, you're based at the one site, but for instance, if the wind direction was not right for the main Kruševo, Macedonia site, they had 3 others, and so you would get to another site, and your trip out there and your bus and your tree would all be taken care of. But I think for me, Macedonia in the 3 weeks there delivered every single day. I took a trip out with some Kiwis to see another site that they often use. We sort of took a day off because we were just a bit frazzled, which was absolutely terrifying. So I was thankful we never went to that site. But yeah, so this is the thing. You are choosing to be with a group of people to fly with the intention of flying every day. And this is the other thing to think about for competitions is how many times have you been on the hill and you've done your weather, you're thinking about it, but you're sitting there and it's blowing a gale and you're like, you look at your watch going, is this going to back off or is this going to improve? It's meant to improve, but is it? And for me, more often than not, my patients will go, no, it's not on today. I'm not going to, no, it won't happen. And I'll pack up and go, but yet the day turns out fine. With competitions, you are committing to be there. So a couple of times we'd arrive early in the morning and it's coming up to 10 o'clock and the wind's howling and you're like, is it backing off? And people are saying, well, we'll give it time. We'll keep staying here. We are here to task. We are committing to flying. So you actually find yourself more accepting of waiting, more accepting for conditions to change. Whereas if in my own site, I'd be like, nah, day's gone. Nah, I'll go off and do something else. So the intention of flying is instilled in you more in a competition. In a tour, on the couple of tours I've been to, when we've got to a site and it's not been good, you go, we'll just go have a coffee. We'll go have some amazing gelato and start drinking, all the sort of things you do in Italy, but you don't fly. But a competition, it's that intention to fly that sets, for me, just sets in the day, which I wouldn't do on my own.
Brilliant, mate. Brilliant. So if there's anything more you wanted to say before we maybe throw over to questions or any...
No, I think ask any questions you like. Pretty much covers what I could express to you. I could talk, I'll finish up with where I'm going to go next with my flying, which is based in competition. But any questions as we're at now, ask away, guys.
Excellent. Yeah, we'll just please feel free to raise your hand. If you kind of wave your mouse over the bottom of the screen, there's a hand icon, and that'll let us know that someone would like to ask a question. But look, first of all, I have to say, absolutely brilliant concept. And as I said earlier, I'm going to totally steal that. I think that's such a good way to go and see. Get in the comp, get guidance, get retrieves. It's cost effective, not bad, like you said. And I think the fact that your mindset to not be ultra competitive probably stood you in really good stead. I can only imagine that some people would go in with maybe false expectations of doing extremely well in a fairly advanced competition. I'm sure that took a lot of pressure off you just by having such a great mindset to begin with. I think Kristen's raised her hand. Hey, Chris.
Yeah. Hi, Erica. Thank you so much. A really great talk, and you're very inspiring. I think Guy and I learnt about the same time that you did, and you've really gone ahead in leaps and bounds. I was really keen to hear that you were flying in a Skywalker Reba. Are you still flying that or flying something else?
I would be flying my Ariba to this very day if I didn't park it in a tree in Bassano.
Oh, well, it's a really nice car park to put it into. I'm still flying my Ariba and absolutely love it. Just don't like the colour, but I like the river. Yeah.
They are, okay, fair disclosure, I have a fellow Skywalk champion here as well. I love Skywalk, and I've come around to Skywalk again. We were lucky in New Zealand at the time that it was the cheapest place in the world to buy Skywalks. It's changed a bit now, but so after I had my incident, my wing was shredded. There was nothing left of it. I do like lightweight wings. I would never go back to a full weight wing, but in the panic and the lack of confidence that came from my incident, I did a panic buy to a very expensive brand new wing recommended by someone else. I'd lost confidence. And I hated it. I hated every moment of it. I didn't like the character. I couldn't wait. It was a fabulous wing. Don't get me wrong. It's a solid, well-known manufacturer. But 20 hours, 10 minutes, I sold it, and I've now gone to the Cumio. So I'm still with Skywalk. I'm on a high B, the lightweight high B. But hand on heart, I would still be on my Ariba. I just thought it's the most fantastic energy wing, comfortable, talky. But lightweight wings, you know what I'm talking about. It's the only way to go. Skywalk.
Yeah, the female, yeah, definitely. Oh, thank you for that. Well, I think you're amazing. I think Guy and I are sitting here going, maybe this is what we should be doing back to Europe. I think we went to Europe with Phil at 2016, wasn't it, Phil?
Yep.
We did, all of us loved it then. Yeah, I think we'd all love to get back there.
Which brings me to my question. Did you do an Italian, a Dolomites competition?
I was, the tour that I was on was meant to go through Italy, Dolomites. You know, I'd actually paid for 3 weeks with this particular person. And again, all honesty here, first on the tour, first day, first flight was in the tree.
Oh.
So, so there were, you know, I can look back on it now, and there was a lot of circumstances with that led me to go in the tree. Not necessarily my input, but it's a whole thing. But yeah, I had honestly wanted to go to the Dolomites to see them, and coming out of the 3 weeks of competition, and again, I probably put on. So by the time I left the competitions, I may have been 60 hours, 65, but the experience and consolidation and learning that I'd done on the 3 weeks, I was very confident in my abilities. My wing was talking to me. I understood what was going on. And you know, you just have that inner, yeah, I can do this. I got this, you know, and to go somewhere like the Dolomites, which I wanted to go to, I was very disappointed I didn't make it, and it's on my list to go back.
So would you recommend a competition there?
Well, we could, again, how I start choosing my competitions. So, for instance, this year, the friends I convinced to go on the competition, I tour with my friends, and I've been cursing them saying, hey, you owe me to come to a competition. My friends can't get their heads around why I do comps, but I forced them to. And I had to say they absolutely had a ball at the Gin Wide Open. I was heavily invested in making sure they had a good time, but they finally got the reason why it just worked. So my competition selection, so for instance, how I'll work out an itinerary. So this last year, it was based around when the Gin Wide Open was happening. So we'd all agreed to be at the Gin for whatever date it was. So I'd look either side of those dates and look what other competitions were running. So Macedonia is an amazing flying location. A lot of the big competitions will run out of, they'll have 8 weeks, 9 weeks of competitions. So for this year, I was to do 2 competitions prior to attending the Gin, and they were based in Bulgaria. So Bulgaria and Macedonia. And I just must say here, it's not Macedonia anymore, it's North Macedonia. So you know, we have to be careful. So it's North Macedonia. So I was looking at 2 competitions based in, one in Bulgaria, and there was also a couple in Slovenia. So we had one consolidator where everybody was going to be with. I had to pull it out of the 2 competitions because I had a project running in New Zealand I had to be on the ground for. So I ended up with flights just getting over there, and at the last minute I joined a tour run by an Irish guy called Gav Gillings, called Rose Valley Lodge, who I'd heard about through competitions I'd done the previous year, and word of mouth and reputation. There's a lot of celebrity tour guides and coaches out there that they might be fantastic pilots, but they might not be the best people as far as coaching go or tour running. So finding word of mouth I found was the best way to find. So I hit Bulgaria with 10 days before the GIN was to start, and we were touring between Bulgaria and Macedonia. So where the weather was good, we'd jump in the van and try different sites. And just by coincidence, the weather wasn't that hot in Bulgaria, so we quickly drove over to Macedonia, and I happened to be there for the World Championships, which were the week before the GIN. We were there to see the World Champ. So this point, I've got some photos to show you, and hopefully you'll probably spot some people you know there. So we'll just do it quickly. So hopefully it works. Right.
No worries. Just while they're loading up. Just while they're loading up, we've probably got another 5 or 10 minutes to go, guys. I saw that there was a question from Royce and a question from Ryan. So just after the photos, that's the order in which I saw the questions. We'll throw over to the guys if that's okay. And sorry, Erica, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go through these quickly. Hopefully the video loads. So this is the view from the hotel in Krushevo. This is looking over the town. So, and this is a morning briefing at the GIN Wide Open. So the guy in the maroon shirt, that's Frosty, Stephen Frost. Some of you guys might know him. This was his first competition. He'd previously been in Macedonia a couple of weeks before the competition. He was having trouble. He was touring, but he was based out of Macedonia, and he was telling me that, he was trying to get down to this town called Bitola, which is your main sort of next town along where everybody goes. So for the week or so he was there prior to the competition, he never made it down to Bitola. And as the competition progressed, we had a turn point that was down towards Bitola. And Frosty's a guy who, he doesn't like thermaling a lot. He goes, oh, I can't fly more than an hour, my back hurts, blah, blah. That day, in a competition, he almost made Bitola, and that's like a 50K flight, and he did it without even thinking, because it took all the emphasis away of decision-making of getting down to Bitola. You're heading that way, you know where to go, you've got to work it out. So this day at the GIN, he, and Frosty's a lovely guy, he ended up virtually working for the organisers. He was helping on registration day. He's a lovely guy. So you get lots of prizes and things. The GIN Wide Open is a great competition because at the end of the event, they have fantastic prizes. Like they give away a brand new wing, a harness, SIV courses, holidays, big prizes. And it's all done on a raffle system. So everybody's got a chance to get them, which is great. So Frosty got a prize that day, I think, for best smile. Going the wrong way. This is me taking off. So quick question. So right in front of me is sort of like a hill where you launch after, and that's your first sort of aim point to sort of get some lift. The middle of the picture is what's called Alligator Ridge. This is an area which always delivers. It always delivers until you're like me and you go there and nothing's there. Paragliding, you know what it's like. And if you look in the rear, you can see the hills at the back. That's the furthest extent of, say, your flying arena. With the GIN Wide Open, we were only tasking to a little past the Alligator Hill. whereas the more high-end competitions, the tasking routes were far over to the other side of the valley. So that gives you an idea of the difference in scope between a high-end comp and this fun comp. So, wrong way again. So this is out on glide, just with another pilot. Again, you can see the towns, the Alligator Ridge, and the open valleys beyond. It's an amazing place to fly. This is probably about 3,000 feet above town, just behind, drifting off back behind launch. And this was one of the best days I had in the gym. This was on practice day. I had landed with a Belgian guy just sort of shy of turn point 2. And you're all tracked, so you have little trackers so they know where to come collect you, you're live tracked. And this particular, that's Stefan in the black in the picture, we were walking out to the road, and the gentleman on the right handing the beer, he just sort of was walking past and in broken German and English said, "Oh, would you like to come for my house is up the way. Do you want to come for a beer? It's very hot." Being sociable, you can. So Stefan and I started wandering up, sat down, and turned out this guy was an ex-builder, a Macedonian who'd worked in Germany, so they were talking. And then all of a sudden we realised there was people landing around in this guy's property. It was like, as I think the Aussie group says, it's pub suck. So in the end, there ended up about 40 people at this guy's house. I don't know where he got the beer from. It kept on coming. And the organisers were worried that why were 40 trackers in one location on a day? They thought something was wrong with the trackers, but it wasn't. We were all just sitting there having drinks. So that's sort of the thing that happens. And then this guy's property, he had a beer. He showed us round. As you can see, more people arriving. A couple of people might spot Bill, the guy with the shirt off. He's an Aussie. And there's Alyssa. So we sort of stopped and met and enjoyed. Oh, this is out on the course line. This was somewhere. I'm not good at recognising it, but again, you can see I'm not in a gaggle. I'm not crowded. It's good flying. And then these are the types of days that when you're there at the Worlds, and there's Phil Mansell chatting away and meeting people. And this is Frosty looking up at the gaggle off launch. And this is the terrible threesomes. This was my first goal. That was Goldfield. Fantastic day, best ever. I could have made goal 2 other tasks. Just ridiculous mistakes that just makes you realise how you've got limited capacity in the air, but it's all a challenge. And this is the start of the Worlds. Why I sort of wanted to show you guys this is, and I don't think the videos are going to run, is the difference in when I talked about that pressure, that sort of that feeling that happens. And a high-end competition, absolutely, but the Worlds, it stepped it up again. It was quite pronounced. So this is the launch. And as you can see there, we've got the back of Phil Mansell, and there's Dave Gibbs, Peter Slade, and Caro getting ready. And I've got some video, but I don't think it'll play. But to be around these guys and just see, off to the side and just watch them. It was a fantastic event to go watch. It really was. There's Pete again. I never got to see Kari launch. She's too quick. She's a machine, not a machine. She's focused. She's drilled. It's impressive to watch. This is Mark Hardman. He's a New Zealand pilot. No, I don't think the video is going to play. So we're gonna, because I had the Aussies taking off. And again, this is the lineup that happens, and what you'll see is people are pushing. There's this unwritten, like, let's move it on, keep going, and it's quite pronounced. So I'll just flick through these quickly for you guys. Dave, more takeoffs which won't play, and of course the compulsory best t-shirt bragging rights. That was my favourite. Paragliding UFO team. This is the briefing area, and you can sort of see the maps and the board behind. Again, this is the sitting round, talking, very serious. And again, more of the lineup. See, they line up quite deep. but they are quick. These guys who want to, again, this is the world's different story, but the competition pilots want to get going. They are on the go. You don't have to be that. If this was me, I'd still be under the tree, fiddling with my instrument, having a snooze even. So that's where we put everything down and come back here. So
excellent. Thank you, Erica. So we look, obviously we can keep going all night, but I'm just mindful of everyone's time. So if we could maybe throw to Royce quickly, and then we'll go to Ryan for some questions. Royce, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Erica. You alluded to dangers. You just the competitions. What could you briefly go through that?
So the competitions I've been to, there were deaths involved, and wow. There was the first year I went to the gin. There was a death at the gin, but it wasn't a pilot of my caliber. It was a high-end Swiss pilot who was there as utilising the gin as a training scenario for himself and the Swiss team. They were entered, but they weren't flying their high-end wings. They were just there as a group to have a week's flying before they hit their nationals. So the incident was handled very, very professionally. We were out on course. We got the safety radio briefing saying a helicopter's coming. If you're on this part of the course, we're going to cancel. It was handled pressure, but and it's very shocking. Deaths don't happen all that often, and part of the event, how they handled it was they did a debrief with the understanding and the Swiss team and the pilot's wife authorised Toby and the safety guys to actually go through and talk us through what was happening and what had happened. They didn't, because they can analyse the tracks and things, we didn't see anything, we didn't really get to see the final details, but we understood how this particular pilot was different from us, albeit in the same race. It was an issue where one of the turn points was at an area that was a very sort of really peaky, real big piece of rock in the middle of nowhere, heats up dramatically. Though that was the turn point, the size of the cylinder, which means the area around the centre turn point, was a 45-kilometre turn point. Part of his training as an experienced pilot with his team, he chose to go into the turn point to the large area of rock to take a big climb. For me, as a beginner pilot, as soon as I hit the turn point, I'm thinking, yay, I've got the turn point, I'll turn back to my next point. Whereas this particular team were utilising it, they made a call to say, we'll actually use an area inside the turn point to start working. And from what I remember, the most likely what happened to this particular pilot was a lee side thermal. I do not like the lee. I understand lee side thermals and how they work. I'm not at a skill level where I would put myself there. So we all had a debrief as a group of 120 pilots with the Swiss team and with the safety officers talking us about it. It was shocking. It does happen. But it was a skilled pilot in a situation where someone of my level would not necessarily go. Other dangers I would say is the competition, as what Kirsten alluded to. If you're that gung-ho, you might not be making good decisions because everybody's flying, I've got to do it. You have to sort of stop that group energy. You've got to, for me, I've got to step back. So that the more competitions I've done since, you might, if you weren't in a competition, you might not make that decision. So there's that sort of psychology that comes into it. But yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Royce. And Ryan, you got a question, mate?
Hey, Erica. Yeah, I really enjoyed your take on just competitions as a learning experience on a whole. I really dig that. But you mentioned thermals are quite different in New Zealand compared to Australia. So I wanted a little take on that. And just also, like, I've never been in a huge gaggle before, but I'd imagine it'd be pretty intimidating the first time. So, like, what happens to your head in that situation? And, you know, sort of how do you deal with that?
Okay, New Zealand versus Australian thermals. Number one, New Zealand's a lot colder than Australia. We have a lot more terrain, so go to Bright, you might see a mountain. Come to New Zealand, we've got the Southern Alps, they're huge. But they again, I'm not an expert, I don't have many hours, but they can be, like all thermals, harder to find. But I've also found them a lot smaller, not so that they can be powerful, and they're very much driven off of big terrain. So you've got to be, I find I've got to watch, I've got to think where the thermal is generating for. Like, is it a big rocky outcrop? Am I going to hit rough air because it's flowing? Whereas my experience of Australian thermals, yes, you've got some monsters out there, but you've got a lot of space around you that you can find the edge and get in the middle and go. You can get trashed around, and the energy that comes off, but they just seem easy to find and fatter. It's hard to explain. I've flown Manila, Bright, Corryong, and Wings Out West. So to your other point of flying in gaggles, first of all, when I was competing early on, I would never go early. I was not flying. A big gaggle for me was maybe 20 people. The best advice I was ever given that I learned at the gym is fly the gaggle, not the thermal. So that didn't really make sense to me until you start flying with a lot more groups of people. So over the subsequent years, I've become more comfortable with gaggle flying and being accepting of being in bigger groups. And another good tip I got given by the tour with Mark Rossi at Cloudbase, where I met Scott and Jeff, have your head on a stick. You've got to be wearing, but it's once you're in it, it is a confidence thing. You've got to fly with determination. You're either in or you're out. You don't pussyfoot around. But there is an organicness that just comes, and it's beautiful. So I'll quickly allude to a thing that happens in competitions that's just, we'll be lucky with Kiwis and Aussies, and I think this is another reason I recommend getting into competitions. When you go overseas, there's not many of us. You know, we're a small group of people. So the first year I was one of four or five pilots in New Zealand, and the other four are the top pilots in New Zealand. Like Australia, all the other top pilots are there. You would not normally get access to these people because on any site, they're exiting, they're gone. You don't even know where they are. At a competition, you're all in the same boat, and you've got a group of people who like to talk paragliding. So I find that, especially, and Louis Tapper, who was a New Zealand pilot, brought me in on this, is that we'd have breakdown sessions, we'd have horse races where these top pilots I would have their coaching, I would have their attention to sort of ask those questions on how am I launching, or what do you think of my track? And you'd get all this top coaching from people you would not even be in the air with, that we had sessions. And it's the same with the Australians, that you sit down and you talk about your flight. You're flying in the same place that these top guys are. And especially at the competitions I've done through Australia with the other 4 or 5 Kiwis, each time after a race, we'll have a session where we get together, and they're analysing guys who fly Enzos and get gold, and they'll turn around and spend half an hour with me going over my track. I know I'm not in their league, but I get all that coaching. And that's another thing you don't realise, is the availability of top pilots that you can get one-on-ones with. It's very good. So going forward, Mark Hardman, who I've been on who I trained XC with, you know, when I went to my New Zealand flying in the mountains, fabulous guy, excellent training in New Zealand. He was at the Worlds, and one of the things that Kirsten will probably back me up on this is they say you've got to get used to going early. If you want to be competitive, if you want to try, you have to start being more confident and pushing yourself further ahead to get in. And I'm standing there, the gin started, Mark Hardman, I think he was New Zealand number 2 or 3, came up to me and says, get in your harness, you're going early. And I'm like, what? And he goes, no, this is the time. We're pushing you off first. So he gave me the confidence this year to every day I was the first one launching at the gym. So I was up there for an hour and a half before the race start. And that's something that every time, especially when I go to Australia and I'm with the group of Kiwi pilots, they say, are you going to go early? I think you should. You can step up. And that's when you're in a gaggle with 30, 40, 50 people. And the other thing that was very good, again, to have the connections of those pilots is, say when you have like someone, I think struck me was Andy Murray, an Australian pilot, when I was flying in Bright the first time, when I decided to go early. I said, okay, I'll go take an open window, I'll go early and I'll fly with the big guns. And it was terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. It is very intense. They fly very fast, but they know what they're doing. There is a comfort flying with top pilots. You know where they're going to go. And I landed and I caught up with Andy that night at the pub. And he says, yeah, I saw you in the gag. He says, you were great. He says, we knew where you were flying. So, and I tell you what, that did so much for my confidence. But it's that responsible risk. You can only push yourself to, I'm never one, hopefully, to do stupid things. We all do. But I think responsible risk is worth the effort. So you just little steps, but then if someone says, yeah, go. So for me going forward, for my next competitions, I am swapping. I'm looking to compete. So I'm going to start changing to a race mentality. I might not win, I might not get a podium, but I'm now swapping to, I'm going to try. I'm going to go early. I'm going to, and this has just come as part and parcel of being in competitions and understanding now how to race. So I'm now moving towards a more traditional into racing, into competing.
Excellent.
And I'll still be at the bottom, don't worry.
Oh, mate. No, I think I'll echo Chris's words and say that you're really inspiring, and I know I've said this like 4 times tonight, but I think it's such a brilliant idea to compete in these open competitions without big expectations and to get so much learning under your belt. I think we're going to wrap up, guys, but if anyone's got a final question, please pop your hand up for Erica. And just as I'll give everyone a moment just to see if they've got a question, I just wanted to quickly ask you, Erica, prior to any of this comp flying or during this comp flying, had you done an SIV beforehand? Have you done one in your career?
I did. No, I only did an SIV after I'd done all these comps.
Right.
Hated it. Didn't like it. Didn't enjoy it. I have committed. It was unfortunately meant to be this year. I was going to do a week's SIV in Turkey with Toby Colombe. So different format again. I realised I'm not good on a 3-day SIV. Ugh. So I was going to do a week of it. So this year, before COVID, my plans were SIV in Turkey, 2 Turkish competitions, and then I was coming back through America to do the US Open, Chilean, some of the big comps, just to have a go. And before you guys go, Australia is very lucky. Gin and Navita in Europe. But shout out to Phil from Fly Dubbo and John Brazel and Kirsten started off the most great competition for fun in Australia. It's called the Wings Out West. It's a towing competition that runs in Trundle. Unfortunately, it got cancelled this year because of the drought conditions. I've done that competition twice. Sign up for it, guys. It is fantastic. It is excellent, really good entry into competitions. Can't rate it enough. and it's oversubscribed. Everybody wants to go, so go early. Get in.
Wow. That's excellent. Erica, thank you so much. Guys, if you've got your microphone muted, could I ask you a favour to just reach down, unmute your microphone? Let's give Erica a round of applause. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
Look forward to
Brilliant.
see you at the next one, and get in touch if you've got any questions. I'm happily talk about it for hours, but we all will, won't we? We like flying.
Absolutely. So
Thanks,
at this
Erica.
point, yeah, and at this point, I'd just like to say, like, I guess officially the talk's finished, but if anyone wants to hang around, we know we've rented the room for the entire night.